Welcome to this Poet Network Administration Phase 2 training session, which is on configuring B2B exchanges for SMTP. Before we dive into the core content of the Poet Network Administration Phase 2 session, let's quickly go over the prerequisites. You need to have completed Poet Network Administration Phase 1, Setup Configuration. This confirms you've created a process network, linked it to a partner, added users, and completed a UI to UI transaction successfully. This course builds directly on those foundations, so you'll want to be comfortable with the basic administration capabilities. First, I'm going to start with a recap, an introduction to email flow B2B connection, SMTP, types of B2B transactions in Poet. Then we'll focus on the B2B configuration for SMTP transactions, how to create a B2B connection in XTT AWS, how to create transform sets and associate them to a B2B connection, how to configure outbound B2B connection association, configuring link settings, configuring message settings, and finally, sending a B2B transaction. So let's start with the recap of email flow for collaboration in Poet. First, a user sends an email to a designated Poet email address to initiate collaboration. This email is called an inbound IB email, which triggers the creation of a new collaboration object in Poet. Poet automatically creates a new collaboration object. The object is assigned a unique identifier, an initial metadata. The originating user is recorded as the initiator or requester. Once the object is created, Poet sends an outbound OB creation email to relevant stakeholders. This email contains the object ID and summary, a snapshot of the initial content, a link to view or interact with the object in Poet. Basically, this email serves as a confirmation and notification of object creation. The user or the stakeholders can reply to the OB creation email to continue the collaboration. The reply is captured by Poet and linked to the existing object. The body of the reply is passed and stored as a comment or update on the object. The reply content is added to the object's activity log or comment section. This ensures the full conversation history is preserved within the object. Any attachments or inline images from the reply are also stored with the object. After the object is updated with the new comment, Poet sends an OB update email to notify relevant participants. This update email includes a summary of the new comment or change, a link to the object for further action, and a history of recent activity for context. This keeps all stakeholders informed and engaged in the collaboration process. Poet enables users to create and update compliance exceptions not only through the API or user interface, but also directly through email, enhancing flexibility and ease of collaboration for partner and owner companies. When a user sends an inbound email to TraceLink with the intent to create a compliance exception, the system interprets the email and automatically creates a new instance of the appropriate object or subtype. The subject line of the email is used as the title of the compliance exception. The body of the email is entered as the initial comment, and any attachments included in the email are added to the compliance exception. When an email is sent to the specific TraceLink provided email address, TraceLink identifies which Poet customer the email is intended for and automatically creates a compliance exception object under that Poet owner's account. Users can also update existing compliance exceptions by replying to an outbound email notification from Poet. When a reply is received, the system identifies the related work item using the original email thread. The subject line is inherited from the original message, the body of the reply is logged as a new comment, and any attachments are added to the existing work item. This allows for seamless threaded collaboration without requiring users to log into the system directly. The Healthcare Distribution Alliance, HTA, provides guidelines for handling exceptions. These guidelines aim to standardize communication between trading partners to help resolve exceptions more quickly and efficiently. To align with these guidelines, Poet standardizes a template for creating and submitting exception notices through email. Let's look into this now. The first part is the standard subject line. This should include the trading partners involved, the exception category, and the issue tracking number. This helps the recipient immediately understand the context. Next, include a brief description of the exception. Keep this explanation short and focused. Avoid repeating information that will already be included in the detailed fields of the email body. The last part is the body of the email. This contains all the required attributes of the exception, such as delivery or shipment ID, national drug codes, NDCs, batch and lot numbers, and so on. Poet generates automated outbound email transactions at key stages in the lifecycle of a work item: creation, update, and closure, to keep stakeholders informed and support email-based collaboration. When a work item is created, an outbound email is triggered automatically. This email includes a snapshot of the business object, capturing key base type attributes along with the current state of the object. The recipient can respond directly to this email, and their reply will be interpreted by Poet as an update to the work item. Whenever a work item or one of its subtypes is updated, Poet sends an outbound update email. This email contains the most recent snapshot of the object, including base type attributes and its current state. While changes are not explicitly highlighted, the email provides enough context for the recipient to understand the status. The update email also includes a recent comments field, which captures recent comments added by a Poet owner or Poet partner. The number of recent comments displayed in the email is configurable by the Poet owner. If the work item is assigned, the updated email is also sent to users from the partner company. Users can reply to the email to continue collaboration, and their responses are recorded as comments on the work item. You can also view the latest comment and download the most recent attachment directly from the email notification. This means that instead of switching back to the application just to see what was added, you now have full context in your inbox. Just note, attachments up to 7 MB can be downloaded directly from the email. Larger files over 7 MB must still be downloaded from the Poet solution. Finally, when a work item is closed or marked as done, an outbound closure email is triggered. Similar to other email types, it includes a snapshot of the business object and its final state. Users can still respond to this email, and their replies will be logged in the system, allowing for post-closure follow-ups if necessary. Let's now take a look at the types of B2B transactions in Poet. There are 4 transaction types of Poet in a B2B connection as shown. For base objects, these transactions are applicable only for work items. For the subtype, they apply specifically to compliance exceptions, which is treated as a special case. Each transaction is linked to a unique generated email address that is used to perform a specific task. The email address is created using the email route combined with the B2B connection owner's network name, followed by the standard domain format. We will explore each of these transactions in greater detail in the upcoming slides. Let's start with the first transaction, which is compliance exception. This transaction supports the creation of a Poet compliance exception through an inbound email sent to the Poet process network. It defines the email address where messages can be sent to automatically create an exception in the owner's Poet network. The email address consists of email route and B2B connection owner network name. The email route value is used by extensible TraceLink transfer, XTT, to generate the inbound email address for the Poet compliance exception transaction. For example, when creating a B2B SMTP connection in the Poet owner network for a Poet partner, and the email route is specified as compliance_exception, XTT generates the email address as shown on the screen. This is the address to which exception-related emails must be sent. Let's understand this with a scenario shown. Bruce Wayne from Wayne Enterprises, which is a Poet network, sends an email with an attachment file to Poet Process Network to create a DSCSA compliance exception. When the process network receives this email, it automatically creates a compliance exception entity with display identifier of DSCSA-1. The subject line of the email becomes the title of the exception, and the attachment is saved along with the exception record. Please note that for the Poet Compliance Exception B2B transaction, only the inbound configuration needs to be set up. No outbound configuration is required. We'll see this in action in upcoming demos. Let's now look at the Compliance Exception Advisement transaction. This transaction sends outbound emails for exception creation, updates, and closure to all network members. You can think of this as a broadcasting transaction. In this transaction, if the email route is specified as compliance_exception_advisement when creating a B2B SMTP connection in the Poet owner network, XTT generates the email address shown on the screen. This address serves as the from email address for all outbound Poet exception-related emails. Let's continue with the previous scenario. When Bruce Wayne sent the email to the process network, Poet not only created the exception, but also sent an email notification to all network members informing them that Bruce Wayne created an exception with the display identifier DSCSA-1. The generated email address is what appears as the sender for these outbound exception-related emails. Notice that the outbound email is configured to include a different reply to email address. Note that for the compliance exception advisement transaction, both inbound and outbound configurations must be set up, as this use case supports bidirectional email communication. Again, we'll see how this works in the upcoming demos. Now let's look at the comment transaction. This transaction supports the ability to reply to an outbound email sent by Poet and automatically update an existing exception through email responses. It defines the reply to email address that enables exception updates through email replies. In this transaction, if the email route is specified as exception_comment when creating a B2B SMTP connection in the Poet owner network, XTT generates the email address shown on the screen. When a partner replies to a Poet-generated email, the response is routed to this address and automatically recorded as a comment on the associated exception. Let's continue with the previous scenario. Along with all network members, Clark Kent from Daily Planet Pharma, a partner network, also received the outbound email. Clark decided to acknowledge the exception. This is where the comment transaction email address serves as the inbound email for Poet. When Clark sent his reply, his name was recorded as the comment author, and the body of the email was saved as the comment on the exception. Optional settings such as whitelisted email and whitelisted domain can be configured to control which external email addresses or domains are allowed to send inbound replies, even if they're not associated with the Poet network. Please note that for the Poet comment B2B transaction, only the inbound configuration needs to be set up, as this configuration is specifically used to process inbound email replies. Again, we'll see this capability demonstrated in the upcoming demos. Finally, let's look at compliance exception assigned to user transaction. This transaction supports the ability to send outbound emails when an exception is assigned to a user. It defines the from email address that will be used for outbound emails related to the assignment use case. In this transaction, if the email route is specified as assign_to_user when creating a B2B SMTP connection in the Poet network, XTT generates the email address shown on the screen. This is the address that will appear as a sender when assignment notifications are sent to users. Let's continue with the previous scenario. When Bruce Wayne saw the comment of Clark Kent about exception acknowledgement, he assigned the exception to him through the Poet UI. This triggered an email notification which was sent to Clark Kent. This email is sent only to the assigned user instead of all network members. Just like the compliance exception advisement, the outbound email of the transaction is configured to include a different reply to email address. That is why both the inbound email and outbound email must be configured for compliance exception assigned to user B2B transaction, as this setup supports coordinated email communication for the assignment workflow. Let's take a look at a use case. Here's the business context. Medivonic is a global pharmaceutical organization operating as an MAH. As part of its DSCSA compliance responsibilities, Medivonic must ensure accurate, timely, and secure exchange of serialized product data and manage compliance exceptions across its trading partner network. Due to increasing demand for its proprietary drugs, Medivonic has partnered with Renderico, a wholesale distributor, to expand production capacity. In terms of ownership, Medivonic is the POET owner, and Renderico is the POET partner. In earlier phases, Medivonic and Renderico successfully completed UI to UI transactions within the POET platform to support DSCSA compliance exception handling and serialized data exchange. However, to support scalable, automated, and secure compliance exception processing and enterprise-level data exchange, Medivonic must now enable B2B integration using SFTP, which is an industry standard protocol. In the demo, I'm acting as the system administrator, and I also have network and app administrator role at Medivonic, responsible for configuring POET to enable secure and automated B2B transactions with Renderico. The objective is to set up the required B2B components to support successful service-to-service exchanges. This is the list of all licensed applications. The owner company already has all the required applications licensed, and the user has been assigned the appropriate roles. So let's look at the steps needed for B2B configuration. They're not necessarily to be in order. To start out, we'll create a B2B connection in Extensible TraceLink Transfer, the XTT app. We'll create and enable transform sets, associate B2B connections, configure the link created in link settings. Once that's done, configure message settings, and send a B2B exception through email to validate the complete end-to-end configuration. Let's now move on to B2B configuration for SMTP transactions. The picture will depict the fundamental flow of a POET transaction being sent from the MAH owner to a wholesale distributor partner. You send a compliance exception email with an attachment to TraceLink. XTT, which stands for Extensible TraceLink Transfer, receives this email, identifies the correct application, in this case POET, and sends the file to B2B. After receiving the email from XTT, B2B transforms the inbound email to the canonical. Canonical is the TraceLink recognized email and sends the email to your POET network. The POET network determines that an outbound email is required to partners and sends the canonical to B2B. B2B again transforms the outbound email to the wholesale distributor format and sends the email to the partner's SMTP connection. The outbound email is routed to the appropriate SMTP connection, ensuring it reaches the intended partner. We're now going to explore each component in detail. SMTP stands for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol and is used for sending and relaying email messages across the internet. There are 3 clear steps. First, connection name. Here we create a name for the SMTP B2B connection. We use a clear and consistent naming convention so it's easy to identify and manage later. Second, inbound configuration. We select the message type, for example, compliance exception, and generate the email address. This generated address is where you'll send your messages. Third, outbound configuration. We again select the message type and define the sending partner. This determines what we receive and from whom. Next, we'll look at the XTT, which is TraceLink's B2B gateway. XTT stands for Extensible TraceLink Transfer. Think of XTT as a data traffic controller. This is where all incoming and outgoing data first arrive before they're processed according to the B2B configurations. It supports AS2, SFTP, and SMTP protocols. To utilize the XTT-AWS application, specific roles are required. Member Standard Access. This role allows access to read APIs. Application Administrator. This role provides access to write APIs, enabling the importing, adding, and removing of certificates. So, XTT allows you to configure your B2B connection and gives an info exchange-like view of the B2B transactions that come in and out of the B2B gateway. To start out, you'll create a B2B link in XTT AWS app. I'm now going to show you how to create the B2B connection in XTT AWS. In Opus, go to the main menu and select Extensible TraceLink Transfer. In the side menu, select B2B Connections and SMTP email. Select Add New. Enter a connection name. This, for example. For inbound allowed list domains, select Add. And in the allowed domain, enter gmail.com. Scroll down. In inbound configuration, select Add. Enter the base email address. This, for example. The message type. This is for compliance exception. Receiving partner. Select the owner. Then enter your email address. Then select Apply. Now for the compliance exception advisement. Enter the base email address. Message type. This is compliance exception advisement. Receiving partner, the owner again, and the allowed sender. Enter the email address and apply. Now for the POET comment. Select comment as the base email address, message type, comment, receiving partner, again the owner, and once again the allowed sender, and apply. For the POET compliance exception assigned to user, enter assign _to_user as the base email address. For the message type compliance assigned to user, receiving partner, again the owner, and then enter the email address once again of the allowed sender. Then apply. Then be sure to save. Now to set up the outbound configuration to SMTP B2B connection. Select Edit. We're going to copy the generated email address for the compliance exception and comment message type. I'm going to keep them handy. Now in the outbound configuration, select Add New. The message type for this is compliance exception advisement. Sending partner is the owner. I'm going to set the include sender configured recipients to yes. Then enter the email address. Now the email address for the comment. Then apply. For compliance exception assigned to user, select the message type. Select the sending partner. Then switch this to yes. Enter the email address again. And paste the email address for the comment message type. And apply. Then be sure to save. Now to create transform sets and associate them to a B2B connection. A transform set is responsible for converting data files into a standardized format that TraceLink understands, known as the canonical format. When a file arrives, the data is transformed into this canonical format. Before being sent onward, the canonical file is converted back into the output format expected by the receiving system. This process ensures that despite differences in file formats or ERP systems, messages can still be exchanged seamlessly across the network. Different companies often use different data formats and standards. The transform set acts as a translator converting data from one format to another so that both the sending and receiving systems can understand and use the information without compatibility issues. The transform set changes the format of the incoming file to a standard format, i.e. TraceLink's canonical, that TraceLink uses. Then, before sending it out, it can convert the file again into the specific format the receiving system needs. So, basically a transform is a map used to convert data from one format to another. A transform set is a collection of transforms. When you associate a transform set with a B2B connection, which we have created in XGT, all the messages flowing from the specific B2B connection use this transform set. So basically, a transform is a map used to convert data from one format to another. A transform set is a collection of transforms. When you associate a transform set with a B2B connection, which we've created in XGT, all the messages flowing from the specific B2B connection uses this transform set. Additionally, you can edit or remove a transform set. This will not have any impact on its association. I'm now going to show you how to create a transform set and associate it with a B2B connection. To do this, go to Administration under the main menu, go to B2B Integration and Transform Sets. Select Add New, enter a transform set name. Under Transforms, select the Add. Under Transforms, click on Add, enter the application. We're using Poet, Process Orchestration for Empowered Teams. Message type. First, Poet Compliance Exception. Direction. This is inbound. Catalog. Select Global. Transform name. Make sure you select the latest version. And select Apply. Now for the Compliance Exception Advisement. Again, this is for Poet. Message type. Poet Compliance Exception Advisement. The direction is outbound. Catalog once again, global. Transform name. Again, select the latest version. And apply. Now for the comments. Application. Poet. Message type. Poet comment. Direction. Inbound. Catalog. Global. Transform name. And apply. Now for compliance exception assigned to user. Poet. Message type. Poet compliance exception assigned to user. Direction. Outbound. Catalog, global, transform name. As always, select the latest version and apply. Then be sure to save. Now we need to associate the transform set with the B2B connection. To do this, select Edit. In the Associated With section, select B2B connections. Locations leave empty. Then select your B2B connection and save. Now on to configuring outbound B2B. Now to configure outbound B2B connection associations. Conceptually, connection associations answer which door does this B2B connection use for this entity and message type. They ensure that when you send or receive transactions, they are tied to the right company or location on the TraceLink network. If a company owner is sending a compliance exception to a partner, the connection association will determine how that order is routed through Poet, ensuring that it reaches the correct destination based on the established associations. You can associate the B2B connection to your company level or to a location. So messages you're sending come from the right entity, and the messages you receive go to the right entity. Now I'm going to show you how to associate an outbound B2B connection. Once again in Administration, go to B2B Integration, this time Connection Association. We'll select Filter and Apply. Notice that the inbound association is already created. Now let's associate outbound B2B connections. Select Add New. In the General section, select the B2B connection. Direction, select Outbound. We'll keep the Associate with Company as the default. In the location section, we'll select the owner and we'll select add in the associate message section. We'll leave the application empty and enter the message type. Poet compliance exception advisement. And apply. And for compliance exception assigned to user, again, leave the application empty, select the message type, Poet compliance exception assigned to user, and apply. Then select save, and the outbound B2B association is added. Now to configure the link settings. Link settings are essential for defining how messages are routed between the sender and receiver entities on the Poet network. They ensure that the correct messages reach the intended recipients. Properly configured link settings facilitate seamless communication and data exchange between companies. They help identify sender and receiver network node IDs, which are crucial for processing transactions accurately. Note that link settings are not used for Poet specifically, but are intended for the B2B canonical to set the file sender number and file receiver number. I'll now show you how to configure link settings for a B2B connection. Once again in administration, under B2B integration, go to link settings. Select add new. Select the B2B connection. Select the linked entity and enter the ID. Then save. To link the partner, once again go to B2B integration and link settings. Select add new. In the B2B connection section, select your B2B connection, select the partner in the linked entity and their ID. Then save. Just note that on the recipient side, a link setting will be needed for each sender and recipient. Now to configure message settings. When setting up outbound B2B connections, message settings act as delivery rules that must be enabled to ensure each outbound transaction is properly transformed and delivered to the correct recipient. I'm now going to demo how to configure message settings for partner transaction exchange. Once again, in administration and B2B integration, go to message settings, select new, select the application, in our case, Poet. For the company or location, select the owner. Then in the message delivery rules section, keep this as the default, owner to owner. Delivery options, transform and deliver, and message type, Poet compliance exception advisement. Select add again, select transform and deliver, and this time Poet compliance exception assigned to user. Then save. We're now going to send a B2B transaction. In this demo, I'm going to validate linking and configurations by sending a compliance exception. Enter a subject, for example, product no data. And the recipient is the compliance exception email ID that we generated in XTT. Optionally, you can attach any files. Then send. This can take a couple of minutes to process, but we can check the status of the file sent on XTT. In the main menu, select Extensible TraceLink Transfer and B2B Messages. Here we can see the status is processing. You can keep refreshing until it shows that it's successfully transferred. Here we can see the status is success now. Now let's view the Poet for DSCSA exception network. Go to the main menu and My Networks. Here we can see the network. Let's assign the exception to the partner. Select the hyperlink, then edit. In the participant section, for the assignee user, enter the email address, and the name will auto-populate. Then save. The partner will then be able to see the compliance exception assigned to them on their side. So let's recap what we covered. During this course, we configured the full end-to-end setup required for secure B2B communication. To confirm everything was working as expected, we tested the setup by sending a compliance exception. At this point, the integration is fully configured and verified. Thank you for your time today watching this training session. If you have any questions, please feel free to email tracelink@tracelink.com.